tortured soul. Way to start, right? A tortured soul. An intelligent, precocious, rebellious youth. Sugar, spice, and everything, actually most of it wasn't nice. Actually, a lot of it was very wrong. These are the makings of a teenage poetry prodigy. But what happens when that poet decides to abandon his talent? What happens to his work if they are widely unrecognized while he was writing them? Why does he even abandon it in the first place? Who helped him, influencing him to do so? Today, we get to talk about the fascinating and tragic life of one of France's most influential poets of the late 19th century, Arthur Rimbaud. Hello and welcome back to the library. And before we get lost amongst the stacks, I want to introduce my guest today, the Book Mac Daddy himself, Noah MacGillivray. How's it going, Noah?
Pretty good, Phil. Thanks for having me here.
Of course, it's great to have you. Now, I know your actual name is Big Mac, but this is a literature podcast, and it's written in my contract with the devil, also my producer, that I have to come up with book-related nicknames, and I thought, hey, why not just add book instead of big? It's good and simple. That works. It's brilliant. And I've never heard of a famous product called like the Book Mac or the Big Mac before. It's completely original. Maybe I should even trademark the name. Huh? Let's.
If it fits, it ships.
So, before we get into the topic, I know I sent you the script, but did you hear about little Arthur before this podcast recording?
No. Not at all. This is my first time hearing about him. I read a little bit of the script, and I was like, whoa, this guy seems kind of cool, kind of edgy.
Yeah. Are you familiar with any French poetry?
The Les Mis. I know that's a book, but that's probably about the only thing I'm super familiar with.
Yeah, Les Mis is not a poem, but it's okay. Yeah.
That's a book.
It's close enough.
Jean Valjean.
Well, I wanted to add, again, I don't speak French before this happens. I took 4 years of honors French and learned none of it. And that's just high school education for you. I read all of his works in translation from French to English from Poetry and Translation's website after hearing about the guy from a friend recently. And, if you have any topics you want me to cover, I do listen to suggestions. And the French are some of my favorite group of people to cover because, they're just so very French. It just makes that so very interesting. Also, their writing tradition is truly outstanding. It's just a what unique tradition. And if I'm going off the cuff here, and if I'm remembering correctly, the French have the most Nobel Prize in literature out of any nation. So that's saying something.
They can cook and write.
So Jean-Nicolas Arthur Rimbaud was born on the 20th of October, 1854, in the French town of Charleville, which is located in northeastern France near the modern-day border of Belgium, which is a pretty crazy place to live any part this part of the 20th century or near the 20th century because reasons. But we won't get to those crazy reasons. We will get to another crazy reason. He had an older brother, Frederick, and two younger sisters, Vitaly and Isabel. His father, also named Frederick, was an infantry captain and even participated in the conquest of Algeria during the late 1840s. He was, by the French account, successful as he was awarded the Legion of Honor by the Imperial Decree in 1854, which is like receiving the Medal of Honor in the U.S. of motherfucking A. And his mother was Marie Vitaly Rimbaud née Cuff, and was a daughter of a well-respected and established family living in Ardennes, which is the region of France where they're all from, basically. Though her brothers were rampant alcoholics and would bring dishonor to the name from time to time. Now, this mother was described as somebody who was just completely lacked a sense of humor. Right? Yeah, not the most fun. And, it really did influence him quite a bit, and we'll describe why later. While his dad was the more genial of the two, Arthur himself used to call his mother the mouth of darkness, la bouche d'ombre in French, which is like fucking harsh.
That's a tough thing to call your mom.
It's just...
What happened? So he called her that,
I mean, she didn't sound like a very pleasant woman, and I'll give you the reason why right now. You see, his father didn't seem to like his home life that much, and after the youngest daughter was born, he joined a regiment in Grenoble, which is a city near the Alps, near the southeastern part of France. They're the first ranking seed in the Pro D2, the second division of the French rugby circuit, right? So they're in the final. They just won yesterday. They beat Provence, if I'm not mistaken. So they're out to the final. If they won that game, they automatically get promoted to the top 14. I know, we talk French rugby.
Well, French rugby.
Yeah, they have a cool symbol. It's like blue and red. I know. Yeah, I guess go them. I don't know. I'd rather have Vans up there, but it's my personal opinion. Yeah. Yeah, he then retired to Dijon, which is where the mustard's from, after his service was done, never to return home.
So he went to go join a military thing.
Yeah, and then
regiment. Yeah,
and then just never went home. Yeah.
Well, could have died. He could have just moved on. We don't know.
Well, he didn't die.
Oh.
They know he was alive.
No.
Yep.
That's too bad.
Yeah, Madame Rimbaud would refer to herself as the widow Rimbaud and never talk about him ever because he left his wife and family to fend for themselves effectively. This probably also influenced how she would educate her children, which was by the strict Catholic discipline of the time. The two boys attended Rosette Institute, and then at the same year, they joined together in 1865, began their education at Charleville College. It was during his time in Rosette where his mother would force him and his brother to learn hundreds of lines of verse in Latin, and if they failed in memorizing these lines, his mother would deprive them of their meals, which sounds messed up, but basically that's how I was disciplined at times too. So I guess it's better than hitting you. I don't know.
Yeah. If it works, it works, I guess. I don't know. I can't. I didn't even learn my times tables.
As a chef, do you think it's okay to deprive children of food?
Absolutely not. That's a one-way street to get a bad kid. A hungry kid? No, thanks.
Yeah, and
Cranky.
we'll learn what happens to him when his teenage years, because by all accounts he was a pretty intelligent student and he was gifted, because by the age of 9 he wrote a 700-word essay about how much he hated Latin. He'd been learning it in school, which is I don't know. I think this
7 years old.
7 years old. Yeah,
That's
9 years old.
9 years old. 700 words on why he hates Latin.
Yeah, I gotta look up how many words this script was. I think it's about 1,000, but that's still a fucking lot of words to talk
I
about.
mean, at such a young age, he had to have such a strong distaste for that situation. Trying to learn Latin and not having a good time.
Yeah,
Let me write a 700-page word essay on it when I'm 9 years old.
I know.
That's tough.
Oh, never mind. This is 5,500. But yeah, still, it took me several days to write this, and I'm not a 9-year-old kid.
Oh, my God.
That's a full 5-paragraph fucking essay. When was the last time you've done that? Right?
Probably when I was 9. Just kidding.
Yeah, I didn't write essays either. Rimbaud started writing poetry early on, and to further prove his intelligence, in 1869, which is a nice number with 18 in front of it, he won his first prize in academic writing in a poetry contest. That following year, his poem was published called The Orphans' New Year Gifts. Here are the first few lines in the poem. The room is full of shadow. You can hear, indistinctly, the sad, soft whispering of two children. Their foreheads lean forward, still heavy with dreams, beneath the long white bed curtain, which shudders and rises. Outside, the birds crowd together, chilled. Their wings are benumbed under the gray tints of the skies, and the new year, with their train of mist, trailing the folds of her snowy garment, smiles through her tears, and shivering, sings. But the little children, beneath the swaying curtain, talk in low voices, as one does on a dark night. Thoughtfully they listen, as to a far-off murmur. They tremble often at the clear, golden voice of the morning chime, repeatedly striking its metallic refrain beneath its glass dome. I think he's 15 at the time when he was writing this. He could be even younger than that. Let me double check. But that is an incredibly gifted poem for a 14, 15-year-old to write.
It paints such a picture. You can see it.
Yeah, and this poem's written in several parts. So it's pretty long. I wanted to add the entire thing, but it would be 2 pages long, 3 pages long, single spaced when you're reading it through its entirety. Now, first thing that struck me again is really how precocious it is. Everyone who reads him really seems to have the same opinion that his writing is far more mature than somebody of their own age. We'll talk about the writing style later, but like the lines are very long and similar to something you would read Walt Whitman would write back in the day. It's actually, I think Walt Whitman would be technically his contemporary, just on the other side of the Atlantic, and I don't think they would have read each other. But you know, you've probably read a Walt Whitman poem. You've had to have.
I probably have, but I can't recall any.
Yeah, it's okay. I've read Leaves of Grass, and I can't remember a single one of the titles either, really. So, yeah. I mean, it was a while ago now. The same year he published this, a new teacher began at the school our young pupil attended. It's Georges Isambard arrived from Paris and became influential in Arthur's life by encouraging him to write more poetry and introduced him to his personal library. Before this, he largely read just the Bible. For the most part, he basically just read the Bible and was required he did the required reading at school. So his mother found him reading Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and she wasn't thrilled about that.
The French Revolution.
One of them, yep.
Oh, one, yeah. Well,
yeah, there's a lot
of one of them.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of French revolutions. That's the thing.
Is this Les Mis is probably the most famous, right?
Oh, it's one of the most famous books ever written in the French language. Yeah, yeah.
In revolutions that the French have had, what is the one that is spoken about in Les Mis?
It's
not up there.
It's not that. It's only famous because of Les Mis, because not much happened, and it's like the Revolution of 1832.
Okay. I need to go back to school or something.
It's okay. We have a joke. It's a canon, this podcast, but there's nothing the French love more than womanizing than a good revolution. It's having a lot of mistresses, cheese and wine, revolution, not in that order.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, there you go. Except for this guy. He's not a womanizer. We'll find out why. 1870. Remember when we were talking about how he lived in the northeast part of France near Belgium?
Yes.
Well, in 1870 was the year that Emperor Napoleon III, the objectively the dumbest of all the Napoleons, that's including dynamite, waged a war on Prussia. The Franco-Prussian War was an unmitigated disaster for this dumb Napoleon. Charleville, the town Arthur lived, being near the border, was immediately affected. His school became a military hospital during the six-ish month conflict. Yeah, we chatted about the importance of this war about when we chatted Alexander Dumas. During this time, Isambard left the town because the school was closed to go stay with his 3 elderly aunts, who, in history, are collectively known as the Mrs. Gindray, which is cute. Now, without his one mentor who helped him focus his precocious energy, this youth turned into a rebellious teenager. On August 29th, he ran away to Paris. He didn't have a valid train ticket, and upon his arrival at the train station, he was immediately arrested and sent straight to jail to await trial for vagrancy and fare evasion, which, crazy.
What an entrance.
I know. A few weeks later, Georges gets a desperate letter from his pupil, and he interviewed with the French authority and was released to live with him and the Mrs. Gindray until the hostilities in the area, meaning the war, blew over, because there's a full-blown war exactly when he was trying to run away to Paris. So
how does he not know that?
He does. It was a bright idea.
Yeah.
Especially because the war famously ends with them taking over Paris. So, whatever. Nearly a month passed between the time he ran away and the time he was returned home, and allegedly, I guess I can't get sued anymore about this because it's so long ago, but Madame Rimbaud slapped Isambard right in the face when he returned his son over, which is a fun image.
Well, hey, how's it going? Here's your son back, and where have you been?
It's like, dude, I just returned your son back. Like, he was the one who ran away. That's not the appropriate response, but whatever. She was kind of a mean lady, not a nice lady.
No wonder why she was so strict.
10 days later, after he returned, he ran away again. This time he went to Charlie, Belgium, then the Brussels, which, if you end up in Brussels, I think this story is going to be a fair warning to stay the hell out of Brussels. Then, when he realized he had no money, he went back to the Mrs. Gindrow's house, and this time his mother actually had to call for police intervention when she learned that he was residing over there for him to get returned home. During this time with the elderly aunts, he wrote poems and sent them via mail to other poets. And this is why we have so much information about this guy and why a lot of his poems exist, because basically all of his life can be studied because of his letters that he wrote and his correspondences to friends and other poets, because he just wrote so prodigiously ever since a young age. So they knew his emotions, their feelings at all times. He would reach out to famous writers and publishers with his poems, and though he was literally only 16 at this point, his industrious and precocious nature would eventually hook him up with a famous poet. More to come later. Before that, it's February of 1871, and he ran away from home for the third time, this time to Paris again, but he was so broke, he just slummed it there, being homeless, and then he walked the entire 250-ish kilometers back home, which is around 155 freedom units back to Charlottesville. 155, I mean, it's flat terrain, but that's long.
Yeah, third time's is not the charm, I guess.
Nope, not for this young man. As you can imagine, this time in his life was just him being a punk-ass teenager with a bad attitude. He drank constantly, spoke rudely, wrote obscene poetry, let his hair grow long, became overall disheveled, and stole books from local shops to keep himself entertained.
Kind of badass, but also like, yeah, a punk ass teenager.
I mean, whom's among us didn't do stuff like this?
I don't think you had a childhood if you didn't. If not, you're going to experience it in your adulthood.
In a letter he wrote to his teacher, he stated that the sufferings are enormous, but one must be strong, be born a poet, and I've recognized myself as a poet. Which this concept of like other famous poets have is like the suffering that you have to do in order for you to understand poetry. I know like a poet, Greg Delaunty, who in the poetry world is pretty well respected in both America and in Ireland. He's an Irish poet that moved here to Vermont and lives in Burlington, teaches at St. Mike's. And he claims that like when he was young, he ate nothing but bread and water for a summer to understand what suffering was, which like, okay, if that floats your boat, go for it.
Oh man, he needed protein. Bread and water?
Yeah, and he was a lifeguard at the time, so he was like, I can't imagine having no energy and being a lifeguard.
Yeah.
Now book Mac Daddy. Remember when I said he was writing letters and poems to famous poets in France? Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how one of the ways he was like kept track of.
Yep. One of these authors is called Paul Verlaine. Paul, at this point, was an up-and-coming poet himself, publishing his first collection in 1866 and becoming one of the most recognized Parisian literary writers ever. When he read Arthur's letters and his poems, he was charmed and invited him to live with him in Paris. This is the poem that made the impression on Verlaine, autocorrect, and it's a sonnet called Sleeper in the Valley. It's a green hollow where a river sings, madly catching white tatters in the grass. Where the sun on the proud mountains rings, it's a little valley, foaming like light in a glass. A conscript, open-mouthed, his bare head and bare neck bathed in the cool blue cress, sleeps, stretched out, under the sky, on grass, pale where the light rains down on his green bed. Feet in the yellow flags, he sleeps, smiling as a sick child might smile. He's dozing. Nature, rock him warmly. He is cold. The scents no longer make his nostrils twitch. He sleeps in the sunlight, one hand on his chest, tranquil. On his right side, there are two red holes. It's that last line is like gripping because it's just a conscripted soldier in a beautiful like mountain area, and then you realize there's two red holes.
He's shot.
He's shot.
He's dying.
Yeah, probably. And he's being peaceful for the first time, and he's cold because he's dying, even though he's in the sunlight.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can feel that, and then it's like, oh, it's so nice, but actually this is just coming to an end.
Yeah. Now, Rimbaud left for Paris in September to go live with this dude, Verlaine, at the age of 16. He moved in with him, and Verlaine lived there with his 17-year-old wife, who was very pregnant at the time. Oh, and he was living with his in-laws, Verlaine. So you could imagine that Mathilde de Floraville, Verlaine's wife, was not very happy to see this dude come up. She was the daughter of a wealthy middle-class merchant, and to me, Verlaine definitely married up and did not deserve this person whatsoever. Like, it's not just like, he wasn't just that wasn't unliked because he was unpopular also and showed up out of the blue. He was also very fucking rude to her. Like, he would basically insult everyone he would meet at this point of his life. His behavior got so bad that they kicked him out of the house, moving into other poets' rooms while he being supported financially by Verlaine, which means he was probably being supported financially by his wife's family. It was also around the time where Rimbaud and Verlaine began their short, tumultuous love affair. Besides sleeping with one another, they would also get ripped off of hashish and opium, probably mixing the two most of the times, and also drinking their weight in absinthe a lot.
Oh, my gosh.
Like, they are hallucinating. They are going nuts.
These guys are going at it.
Yeah. Matilda knew this, of course, because you can't hide being high on hash.
And opium.
Or really drinking absinthe.
Yeah. That's a dangerous 3. What are you talking about?
Matilda knew that, and she ended up like fleeing Verlaine because when he was a rampant alcoholic basically all his life, and at this point he was physically abusing her and then their newborn kid basically, which is terrible. There was a brief pause where things could have ended up better for both of them when Arthur returned home in Charleville. But he went back to Paris and provided Verlaine with an ultimatum: either travel with me or end their relationship. His wife also provided a similar ultimatum: stop fucking the 16-year-old boy and be a good husband and father, or it's over between us two. In the July of 1872, Rimbaud and Verlaine left for Brussels together, with Verlaine abandoning his wife at the station. Again, going to Brussels was a bad move.
Oh, my dude. This guy, he's on something else. He's on vermouth, opium, and hashish. Jeez.
And 16.
and 16.
And picking up like basically a 30-year-old at this point, I think. Yeah, I don't remember what his age was. When finally, she returned home, right, Verlaine's wife, she got a legal separation, but their divorce would take over 13 years because divorce was not easy at the time. She was able to basically get it because she could prove his homosexuality eventually, and at least this affair, and also the physical abuse and his drunken rampage. You basically had the trifecta of why you could get divorced back in the day, but it still took that long.
Wow.
Together, they moved to London, where they tried to establish themselves in the writing movement up there. Their time began in some optimism, with Rimbaud beginning one of the key works he's known for called Illuminations, which he would be writing and compiling over the course of a few years. Rimbaud, being between 17 and 19 while he was in Paris, didn't really work from what I could tell other than teaching some French courses. He would spend most of his time in the reading room, which from an American perspective, it sounds like it's a giant library in the London Museum, which is cool.
Yeah.
The two poets would reside they would live in London off and on for the next few years, with Rimbaud returning home at least once, I believe, and with Verlaine leaving at least a couple of times because he fantasized about getting his wife back to love him, even though he's clearly in an affair with a young man, like underage for us. So
yeah, that's insane. I feel like even back then, that's pretty crazy for that thing to happen.
The age, I don't know what the acceptance of that was, because she was 17 when she was pregnant with his child and clearly married.
True.
But no, homosexuality was pretty much a capital offense. Like you go straight to jail, you can get killed in France at the time.
Yeah, that's very edgy of him to do at this time. That's insane.
Rimbaud was not he was frankly an asshole at this point of his life. And people knew about Verlaine's history with his wife, too. Rumors spread pretty quickly. They were just not popular in France. There was also the rumors of their love affair that just like was openly discussed in the literary circles they wanted to join, which nowadays, like I said, it's not really, nobody would give a shit really nowadays in most literary circles unless you're an asshole. But back then, very illegal and kind of a faux pas. They were also consuming tons of hash, opium, and absinthe throughout this time. There were people in the scene who refused to be in the same room as them. And to put that in perspective about their attitudes, this was not just because they were gay lovers. Like, this was because they were assholes.
Yeah.
Finally, the pressure of having a bad reputation, and no, not the cool kind that Joan Jett has, and the fact that Verlaine desperately regretted his decision about leaving his wife, who, by the way, was supporting him financially beforehand, he returned to Paris. But now the love affair with Rimbaud was also driving him crazy, and he wanted to be with him as well. So he reached out to Rimbaud to meet him, this time in Brussels, which, again, don't meet anyone in Brussels. I wrote, especially if you are meeting from mussels, it's not an ocean. Jean-Claude, you know the state of your city's shellfish calling you out, Van Damme. I probably won't be able to take you on now, but a sure shit hell can lose pitifully against a 65-year-old man. Moving on. The couple's reunion was bad. It was very, very bad. Verlaine was now drinking heavily and was very depressed. He was threatening suicide. And Rimbaud was being an insufferable teenager. On July 10th, during a verbal dispute, Verlaine put out a revolver he had recently purchased and fired 2 shots at Rimbaud. Fortunately for Rimbaud, he was drunk and a bad shot. But one bullet did hit him, lodging itself in its wrist. I don't know how you can lodge a bullet in your wrist, but I guess bullets weren't the same back then.
Well, he was shooting at Rimbaud, right? So it went in his wrist.
Yes.
Yeah. So it missed completely and hit his hand, basically.
Yeah. It just, I guess bullets were made of weaker stuff back then.
It was a ball, probably. A revolver? Oh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. 1800 something?
Yeah.
Revolver? Probably not as strong as a Colt 45 today.
No. Now, Arthur didn't immediately press charges. However, he decided to leave Brussels, which was a smart move. And somehow he thought it was a good idea for Verlaine to accompany him to the train station. Obviously, Verlaine was drunk and acting insane. So for fear of being shot again, he ran to a police officer and asked him to arrest Verlaine, which is also a smart move. 2 smart moves and 1 bad so far. The police officer, obviously confused, did eventually arrest Verlaine. Verlaine was charged for attempted murder. He was strip searched and then imprisoned, where he was eventually given a 2-year sentence for wounding somebody with a firearm, which they dropped down from attempted murder, which I guess that you can get. That was a charge, specifically wounding somebody with a firearm. Nowadays, that's just attempted murder.
Yeah.
Or aggravated assault in the United States. I got charged with slamming a beer can over a person's head.
But the charges didn't stick, so I'm able to go.
Yeah, so Rimbaud...
It's my first offense.
It's his first offense. Yeah. Rimbaud had surgery to remove the bullet still lodged in his wrist, and then he moved back home to Charleville. He was like 18 or 19 at this time. So what a life he's already lived.
Oh my gosh.
We are now going to have to put a bow on Verlaine's life almost entirely. We're going to talk about him a little bit later, but the two would meet only one more time, in real life. Verlaine would go to prison, and then he would find God reconverting back to Catholicism when he was there. He would also become a famous poet and one of the leading figures of the symbolist movement that was taking part of the late 19th century in France. He would suffer from drug addiction and alcoholism for the entirety of his life. And, he died only when he was 51 years old because of both of them. I don't know if I will ever cover Paul Verlaine, because his story is kind of sad, and that's his story really is intermingled with Rimbaud, and Rimbaud is just so much more fascinating. But that's just wrapping him up right now. Returning to Arthur, he is home in convalescence after getting a bullet out of his wrist. His ex-lover, now mentally unstable and in prison, he gets put into a depression himself. He was able to channel his feelings into writing arguably his most well-known work, which is Une saison, un enfer, or in English, A Season in Hell, which, as a 19-year-old, A Season in Hell might as well have been somebody in the emo movement in the late 2000s for us, right? That straight out of a Screamo album from...
I don't know, Hawthorne Heights.
Oh, Hawthorne Heights, yeah.
Bring Me the Horizon.
The Scary Kids. That was one of my favorite ones.
Oh, yeah. Arsonist, Get All the Girls.
Oh, yeah. That was a good one. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Mindless Self-Indulgence. That was another funny one. Crazy name. No, who did Can't Be Saved? I'm stuck in a coma. I'm stuck in a never-ending sleep. Chasing all cars. Taking Back Sunday and all. This work is... God damn, I'm going to have to remember this. All right. The work, A Season in Hell, is a prose poem that is divided into 9 parts that are loosely tied together. The poem has been described as a near hysterical quarrel between the writer and some other significant other. It was actually self-published by himself, in Brussels, and distributed mostly amongst Rimbaud's friends. Rimbaud mostly lost interest in promoting his work almost immediately after publishing and never thought about republishing. However, this is considered one of the pivotal works in the symbolist movement, just like this little poem book. Yeah. So, symbolism. Let's touch upon it, right? It's the late 19th century movement, mostly of French and Belgian origin, but not exclusively, as it was big all over the world with English writers as well as Russian, but any major language would have a symbolist writer that would represent absolute. So symbolism represents absolute truths through symbols in their writings or through physical art, which is different than realism, because realism would paint things like landscapes or fruit, whereas let's say you have this angel over somebody's body and it's a symbol of death, right? Oops. Symbolism. Yeah. It's very, very famous poem, piece of work that's like that. Particularly, Rimbaud emulated the Pyrenees school, mimicking contemporaries like Victor Hugo, Les Mis dude. This came from a journal. The name, the Pyrenees movement, right, like a school, came from the journal called La Pyrénées Contemporaine, which published big-name French poets between the 1860s and 90s. Arthur definitely read this journal and was influenced by the work because he submitted poems to it, but I don't know if he was ever published in it. I don't think he was. Here's a bit of... Yeah, so any questions before we do a little bit of From a Season from Hell?
No, I think I'm good.
It's from one of the 9 parts. This one's actually called Night in Hell. Again, like Night in Hell. That sounds like something that like Brand New would say. Like, the devil and God is raging inside of me. Terrible human being. Great album. I have swallowed a famous gulp of poison. Thrice blessed be the thought that came to me. My guts are burning. The venom's violence racks my limbs, deforms me, fells me. I'm dying of thirst. I'm stifling, unable to cry out. It's hell, the everlasting torment. See how the flames rise up. I'm burning in the proper manner. Well then, demon, I've glimpsed a conversation to say to goodness and joy, salvation. Let me describe the vision. The air of hell suffers no hymns. It was of millions of enchanting creatures, sweet spiritual harmony, strength and peace, noble ambitions, who knows what, unquote. Like, very much like emo. Like, but, he just got shot, so.
And after, I don't know, the relationship he had with the older gentleman, his name again, I forget. Verlaine, yeah. I don't know. That's a crazy thing to get out of and then be shot and escape. Now he has time to reflect.
Mm-hmm. And it's fucking Census Fail. That's who I was thinking of, the band. You've never heard of the Jersey band? Yeah.
Jersey
was huge for the Screamo movement. It was terrible, actually. Trying to be in a band at that time, you either had to be like in a really weird hardcore band or a ska band, and there was no middle ground. Trying to be like anything weird punk or anything like that was... Nobody was listening to you.
Not allowed.
No. Yeah, I have stories. Rimbaud returned back to London temporarily and moved in with another French author. This one was Germain Nouveau, and there he finished a collection called Illuminations that was mentioned before. This work is also his other major work, arguably, that was published during his lifetime. This was published in 1875, but the story of the public at first, right? But the story of the publication gets super messy because somehow Verlaine gets involved again. Basically, Germain is asked to find a publisher for Rimbaud because he wants to travel. Somehow Verlaine gets wind of it, and then Rimbaud asks him to send the copy to Germain. Side note, this is also where Verlaine meets him for the last time. All right, so one thing leads to another. Germain does find a publisher, and Verlaine is like, wow, why didn't I just do the work himself and find the publishing? And then he asks Germain to get the work back from him, and the Verlaine's ex-wife gets involved and hinders the publication, so it wasn't published until 1886 in full. At least that's where I've learned. And the published full version, or the original version of his publishing in 1886, was actually published without Rimbaud's knowledge at all. Like, he had no clue that the book was going into the press. Illuminations is basically the last thing Arthur Rimbaud writes, like, ever, with a few exceptions here and there. From here on end, all his works will either be published posthumously or without his knowledge. At the age of 20, he gave up writing literature altogether. Now imagine giving up something you're actually genuinely good at, but don't even know because you haven't been recognized about it. Now, S.A. Karapukin, writing for Plowshares at Emerson College, explains why he gives up writing, at least why he thinks it is. Quote, the poet stopped writing because he had lost hope of being heard. By 1876, he no longer had a companion by his side who could serve as a live audience for his revolt, and most of his distant admirers had not been born yet. Unquote. So he basically gave up
because it wasn't happening.
Yeah, which, okay, like, I get being discouraged, but on this pod, like, we've also found that many people don't get famous for like 20 years or more, and like, my reaction, dude, is just be patient. You're 20. I think it was his piss poor attitude that basically he thought the writing became too difficult, and he gave up because he wasn't recognized. But like, plus, you know,
so young.
Yeah, like, plus, like, Verlaine and, like, you know, all of his life was including writing included this ex-lover. So
maybe he's kind of given up that hope, yeah, or that relationship with the writing. You know, is kind of tied to one another because he's so young, and you do all that, and it brings you together and makes writing even more powerful. If you let it go, I don't know. It's maybe you thought it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been for him because, of course, he's 20 and the story doesn't end here, right?
Right, of course.
Arthur Rimbaud enlists in the Dutch colonial army and sets sail to Java, which is in modern-day Indonesia, all the way around the world from where he's living.
Whoa.
He did this to get the free passage to Java, but once he was there, he deserted only after 3 weeks and hid out in the jungle for like a year before securing passage back to France. Which I don't fucking blame him for that. He had to go incognito back to France because desertion was a capital offense. If the Dutch found him, he would have been executed. No questioning whatsoever. He would have been executed.
Whoa.
Most countries don't kill their soldiers for things like desertion anymore. And realistically, in the U.S. of motherfucking A, this was almost always pretty much unheard of. Like, murdering deserted soldiers was just not something we really did, ever.
I don't think, yeah, you don't do that.
I mean, it's incredibly common. In most armies, you'd be surprised.
Whoa,
like,
I did not know that.
Up until WW, the prequel, and even during World War I, there was executions happening a lot. It's just like, I mean, yeah, the Romans used to murder their soldiers all the time.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Wow, I can't imagine. It was all for morale, but it's like, you want to boost my morale by murdering my bunkmate? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. Woohoo.
Rimbaud returns home for a little while, and then he leaves for Cyprus, where he got sick. And when he returned back to France, he was diagnosed with typhoid.
What's that? What is that?
Typhoid is a shitting disease, I believe.
Oh, God.
It's one of those many shitting diseases that you can get back in the day. Let's see here. What was typhoid exactly?
Like really bad diarrhea. That's what I'm imagining.
It's a bacterial infection caused by salmonella. Yeah.
He ate some undercooked chicken.
Headache, stomach pain, fatigue. Yeah. Probably bad water, most likely. Sure. And related to salmonella food poisoning.
Ugh.
Yeah, mostly kids are affected nowadays. Ooh, it's the opposite. It's constipation.
Oh,
I was wrong. I was thinking of something else. Interesting. Yeah, typhoid fever is recommended to have a lot of vaccinations in a lot of places. It's basically eradicated in the United States, but you never know. I heard it's coming back. We're bringing it back.
You never know.
It took a couple of years, but he decided to really focus on trying to make money finally, right? He's like in his 20s now, mid-20s. Like he's getting serious about his real like life. He wants to make money in order for him to live like a happy life. And what would you do if you lived in Europe in the late 1800s, like late 19th century? Where would you go?
Me, personally?
Yeah. You have no prospects, real prospects. You don't have any royal ties, right? Like, think about it.
Where would you go? Germany?
Well, it's the time of colonialism and imperialism.
England.
Well, you wouldn't go to England. You would go to one of the territories.
Oh.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's not really fair he didn't go to a French colonial territory. Let's say he went to an English one, like you were mentioning. But British colonies be British colonies. He ends up signing up with Bardi & Co. agency. Bardi agency was based out of Lyon, France, who, you know, they're doing good in the top 14 right now. They just lost to Bath last weekend in the Challenge Cup. Bath definitely deserved that win. I was rooting for them. But Sam Underhill, their star flanker and also the English flanker, had a really, really nasty high tackle head-on-head with Nanishvili, the Georgian fullback. Nanishvili is like one of the best fullbacks in the world. He's from, I think, Tbilisi, definitely from Georgia. And like he got up and just started walking. He was fine. I'm like, there's no way that man isn't just out of his mind concussed right now. Like it was bad. Now Sam Underhill is banned for 4 games, and Bath is like the top-ranked team in the Premiership. And, you know, one thing led to another, but he won't be able to play in any of the playoffs or the finals in the Premiership. So it's crazy. Yeah. Sam Underhill, great rugby player.
He has crazy cauliflower ear.
Yeah, in just 1 year, too, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, I think they're both pretty big, but one might be worse than the other.
Moving on. Love talking rugby. Yeah.
Rugby.
Yeah, so Bardi Agency capitalized on the French people's newfound love for coffee. And they started exporting these coffee goods, first from Yemen, and along with North Yemen's coffee cherries, to France. By the time Rimbaud was their employee, half of North Yemen's coffee crop was shipped to Marseille via Aden, which is a city or a colony in Yemen. And all of this made possible with the opening of the Suez Canal in 1869. So 11 years they went from basically not having any coffee from Yemen to half of the crop all going to Marseille, France.
They like the coffee.
What Rimbaud was doing there was at first supervising Hindu women workers who were working with the Bardi & Co. company. For him, the East was like this mythical place originally, but when he got there, he realized that Yemen is like super hot, and that he was afraid the locals would make a complete idiot out of him because he just didn't know the customs. Now, the company he worked for was based out of Aden, Yemen, but as he worked up the ranks in the company, he began to run the firm's agency in Harar, Ethiopia. And this is where possibly one of the longest lasting impressions he would ever make on the global history and global trade was made. Before then, though, we talk about that. In 1884, the last publication of any of his writings occurred when he was alive, at least a publication that he knew and consented to. He wrote the report on Ogaden, which was published. It was a description of culture and people of where he was living at the time. I had a hard time actually finding this piece. What's interesting here is that it was published by the Société de Géographie in Paris. It's not a one-for-one comparison, as you know, this society is often government funded, or at least has a lot of those funds and backed by them. But like, think about him being published in National Geographic. Well, National Geographic was huge. You know, like, it's not as big anymore, but like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, yeah.
It was pretty big.
Yeah. And I know NG gets government grants, but like, you know, it is a separate for-profit business, and I don't think the society is. His time with the Bardi agency did run its course, and when it did, Rimbaud stayed in Harar, Ethiopia. He began his own commercial dealings, exporting coffee to France and importing generally outdated firearms.
What an interesting thing to import.
Our little Arthur became a gun trafficker.
Whoa. Super edgy.
He's probably in his late 20s when he's starting, or early 30s. No, late 20s, yeah. Crazy. He was pretty successful at coffee trading. In fact, he's basically credited for being one of the pioneers in the business of trading Ethiopian coffee to Europe, which is not like a real thing before this time. So next time you have any of that free
Ethiopian
trade, delicious Harar coffee beans, think about our boy Rimbaud needing to take a bullet for his wrist for you, and then forever giving up his ambitions of a poet, then deserting the Dutch colonial army, which I can't blame him for again, then getting typhoid, and now in present day in the story is trading coffee for guns to none other than the Ethiopian royal army, basically, and the royal from Shawa, the governor of Harar, and one of Arthur's closest friends at the time. I'm sorry, I definitely butchered his name, but I'm going to call him Rasmekanim. Yes, our boy befriends one of Ethiopia's greatest military leaders at the time, and is one of the leaders who played a key role in the Battle of Adwa, which, to keep it brief, this battle kept the invading Italians out of Ethiopia and made Ethiopia one of the few places in Africa to never be colonized by Europeans. Which they slaughtered the Italians. It wasn't close.
Good for them.
I know. I mean, yeah, they're invading your land. Fuck them.
Yeah, and they have outdated guns, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, the Ethiopians had a mix of outdated and definitely up-to-date guns, too. But, like, it was a difference between, like, 100,000 Ethiopian troops versus, like, 1,000 Italians, like, or 2,000. It's like, it wasn't ever going to end up any way. Ethiopia, also famously a very mountainous area. So, good job. Very smart on your part, Italy. And if you ever want to, like, have a good laugh about, like, and if you have, like, a sixth sense of humor, as I do, about military history, read about Italian campaigns after, well, because Roman people are different, but it tends to end up being, like, the worst possible decisions are always made.
You don't hear much about them. You don't hear about them conquering much after Rome.
Nope.
That's about it.
There's a reason.
All right. I'll look into it.
Yep. Oh, and those Harar coffee beans, I learned, are like one of the oldest continuously grown coffee beans in the world, too. So, like,
it's pretty cool.
Now, I don't want you to think he was particularly successful at being a good, like, gun dealer, because there are several accounts of his trades being, like, just terrible financial disasters. And, like, he would sometimes start a deal before a battle, but then the battle would start, and due to circumstances of transporting outdated weapons, the battle they needed for was fought and already won. So then he would be forced to trade, like, all those guns for a lot lower than he would buy them for. So he would just lose a bunch of money. What is true, though, is in 1888 and 1890, between those years, he established a store in Harar, taking care of business with, like, some firm accuracy and with honesty. but was often dismayed and bored and financially stressed all throughout this time. He wasn't really making a lot of money. So I'm sure someone was also thinking this, because I was trying to find this research, but Verlaine, after him, what happens to Rimbaud's love life, right? Like, what's going on?
Right.
Really, I couldn't find anything, and like probably for the best, because let's just say that Yemen and Ethiopia, like, they're not really all that super welcoming to gay lovers or gay people. Homosexuality in these countries are both very illegal, and like to the point where people are killed over it, like often. Well, not often, but occasionally. They're definitely ostracized. So imagine back in the late 1800s when this was happening. Like, Yemen is currently being absolutely obliterated by bombs from Saudi Arabia, and was sold by the United States and other countries. And the United States are actively bombing them too. And we have been since, if I'm not mistaken, at least Obama, maybe even before with Bush. But, I digress. And Ethiopia is one of the countries with the oldest Christian religion in all the world. And like the Coptic Christianity is a very unique branch of Christianity.
Yeah. That's a huge wall of information. Like, whoa.
Sorry, I digress.
Well, I mean, it's so prevalent now, being gay and proud of who you are. It's so welcomed, like in America at least. It's kind of crazy to think like how much it's changed if you compare homosexuality in general now as back then. It's like, why did you get killed over it? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, a lot of religious reasons.
Yeah,
but also like this. Just remember, this happened in our lifetime. It didn't have it. This change, this cultural shift. Like, it was only 10 years ago that the Supreme Court made it legal to be gay in this country.
That's very true.
Yeah. Now, Bookback Daddy, like, we're going to have to finally put a bow on this, because in February of 1891, Arthur's right knee began to hurt him. He thought it was just simple arthritis, but by March, it became so painful he went to see a doctor who misdiagnosed him with something called tubercular synovitis and recommended immediate amputation.
Oof.
Which, I don't know how you treat tubercular synovitis these days, but immediate amputation seems like an extreme measure. It wasn't. It was an extreme measure he probably should have taken, because he left home for France and went straight to the hospital in Marseille when he got there, where his leg was immediately amputated. It turned out that he had a very, I think it's a rare form of bone cancer. He tried to go back to Ethiopia at one point throughout this year, but the rest of his year was spent in a ton of pain, and by November it was clear that he wasn't going to make it, unfortunately. He was given his last rites on November 10th, 1891, and died shortly afterwards. He was only 37 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I already mentioned that he did not write any more poetry by the time he was 20 or 21, and most of his influence occurred after he was passed. Paul Verlaine, that short-time tumultuous lover, collected all the poems he could from the time he was writing to him and other poets, and he sent to his friend and compiled this thing called Poesies Completes, which was published in 1895. And most of his fame came from this work, though he started to become famous without his knowledge after Illuminations was published within his lifetime, right? It is difficult to overstate his influence on French poetry and even things like modern art and music. People like Jim Morrison of The Doors and Patti Smith of the Patti Smith Group stated directly that his works influenced them. Bob Dylan even mentions him by name in the song "You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go," which is one of my favorite Bob Dylan songs, and something that I've listened to when I'm mixed feelings of sadness and closure from the joy of knowing that something beautiful just ended. It's a beautiful song. It's from Blood on the Tracks, one of his best albums that came out in the 70s. It's the same album that Tangled Up in Blue is on, and yeah, I just love Bob Dylan. Yeah. Shelter from the Storm, Idiot Wind. I listened to it earlier today. You're a big girl now. He is also portrayed in several movies, and the one I think worth mentioning is a little known one called Total Eclipse. And every time I read this and see it, I want to say Total Eclipse of the Heart.
I was gonna say that's where I was going.
Total Eclipse is a movie from 1995 based on the play written in 1967, and this accurately depicts the relationship between Verlaine and Rimbaud.
Oh.
It stars David Thewlis, who you may remember him as Professor Remus Lupin, the werewolf professor in the third Harry Potter book.
Yeah.
Or the bulimic villain in the third season of Fargo. Remember the guy with the horrible teeth, the British creepo? Did you see Fargo?
I think I know who you're. I can picture it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would recommend Fargo, the show. He plays Verlaine, right? So Thewlis plays Paul Verlaine.
The little boy lover.
No, he plays the real dude. He plays the older boy.
Right. He like the older guy who likes
the little boy love. Okay. Sorry, that went over my head.
That's okay.
Yeah. While an up-and-coming star plays Rimbaud himself, someone you may have heard of, named Leonardo DiCaprio.
No way.
Yeah.
Total Eclipse?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm watching this right after this.
I mean, I've tried to find it. It was not a popular movie then. It's really hard to find now.
Oh,
this was 1995, so this is like immediately after What's Eating Gilbert Grape, but before he got famous with the Titanic, which is 97.
Okay.
That's like, there's even a very steamy kissing scene that I saw online between the two. It's fueled of opium, of course, right? So, like, imagine, like, Professor Lupin
smooching on freaking Jack from the Titanic.
Yeah, and, like, in real life, David Thewlis is, like, 30 years old, and Leo is maybe 20, maybe 19. So it's an interesting scene.
Well, it's kind of like how they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the kind of same relationship. That's crazy.
And it's got to be good acting, right?
Yeah, I got to see this movie.
The film had pretty bad reviews overall.
Damn it.
It only grossed $340,000 in the box office, and the movie cost about $7 million to make.
Holy shit.
So it's safe to say it was a massive flop.
Oh, damn, that's a tough one.
But, like, it's just funny thinking that these actors were playing in there, like, before any real star power, right? Like,
right, yeah. Before they played these roles we know them from, yeah.
Now, that's it. That's the script. I'm going to get into plugs and sources, but do you have any questions or anything you want to add?
No, I mean, what a short and interesting life this guy had.
Yeah.
It's kind of like he knew he had all this vim and vigor when he was so young, and it had, like, the ability to write it out and spell it all out. I'm glad I got to know about it.
Yeah.
It's super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's really impressive how precocious he was. Like, I keep using that word, but, like, it's the best way of putting it. And it's one of those things where I don't think we need to imagine what would have kept happening if he kept living, because, well, he stopped writing for 17 years before he passed away. So there's no imagining. Like, he could have written, but he didn't. So
17 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time to take a break. So he probably never would have. He probably would have kept trading stuff for the remainder of his life.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for him, Ethiopian coffee wouldn't be accessible through the Western world, really, or the global north, right? So, plug in my Patreon, the Lost in the Library podcast on Patreon. Also, any questions, please send them to lostinthelibrarypodcast@gmail.com. Any suggestions, too, I'm happy to hear them. Follow us on Instagram, again, Lost in the Library there. I have a Substack where you can read the book or some of my works at Fil Deptula, so just my name. And that all of these still always under development perpetually, just have no time. Some of the sources are the book Rimbaud by Graham Robb, Arthur Rimbaud by Enid Starkey, Rimbaud's House in Aden, Yemen, Giving Voices to the Silent Poet by Lucine Tamian from the Department of Agriculture of University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. This is Rimbaud's bio on mag4.net, S.A. Karupkin's article on plowshares. Let's see here, South 24 Net's article by Fatima Johnson about, Arthur Rimbaud. Poetry Foundation's article on Arthur Rimbaud. and the poetry in translation.com was where I found a lot of his works, because it was actually, I needed to find his book quickly and I couldn't find it anywhere nearby here, and they just make it open to the public for you to read, so it's excellent. And a smattering of Wikipedia articles to get simple information on like Paranesium, symbolism movement, illuminations, Ras Mackinnon, and Total Eclipse of the Heart, the movie. Cool. Anything before we go?
Thank you so much. This is super fascinating. I want to start reading and writing now. It's so cool.
That's the point of the podcast. It was always to try to get my friends to read and write more.
I think I want to. There's like a whole world out there of things I don't know and authors I don't know and new information to learn. So thank you for opening this door for me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
For everybody who follows us, I'm going to probably take a week off next week because I just need a break, and I've got stuff. So see you in 2 weeks.